In evangelical circles right now, there's this huge conversation about what is the mission of the church.
Yeah.
And we use missions and mission. We have the mission of God and all these parts of the conversation. And a lot of people are really concerned about us going too far. Could you answer for us what the mission of the church is?
Yeah, sure. I'll give it a shot. I would like to back up, if I can, and talk about the mission of God. And because I think the concept of mission is best located in the Godhead and who God is and what He intends to do. So let me talk about God's mission for a moment. You know, so I think maybe a good way to describe God's mission is to say that His mission is to glorify Himself by redeeming His imagers and restoring His good creation. And that's what He will do. He will save believers for Himself from all tribes, tongues, peoples, and nations, and He will renew and restore His good creation such that we have a new heavens and a new earth. So the church's mission, or the Christian mission, as you can say, follows on the heel of that, and it fits with those categories. Our mission is to glorify God by participating in His redemption of His imagers and by participating in a particular manner in His renewal and restoration of His good creation. So let me talk about that for a moment. So we participate in His redemption of His imagers by speaking the gospel, by pointing people to Christ, both in word and in deed. And then we participate in His renewal and restoration of creation only in a very, it's not like we can actually restore and renew creation, but what we can do is we can redirect all things that we do toward Christ. We can look where sin is operative in any realm of human culture or society, and we can try to redirect that towards Christ.
Like
and
people being involved in politics, for example.
People being involved in politics, sports and competition, the arts, the sciences, all of these sort of public creational realms. We can redirect those things toward Christ as a sign and a preview of God's coming kingdom, the day in which all things will in fact be directed toward Christ.
So is that the church's mission, to be involved in politics and education and sports and arts? Is this part of the church's mission?
So I would say yes and no. So what I want to do here is introduce a distinction between the church as an institute and the church as an organism. So the church is an institute, and particularly when the church is gathered on Sundays, we do things that the Bible prescribes for us to do. We sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. We preach the Word. We fellowship with one another. These are the churchly things we do with the church as an institute. However, when we leave the church and go out into the world, we remain the church. So I don't think that the essence of church is assembly. I think the essence of church is covenant. And we remain covenanted together when we leave the church gathered. And so the church as an organism that scatters throughout the week, it is that sense of the church in which the church's mission is to redirect all things toward Christ. In that sense, everything is mission. And Bishop Stephen Neal says, if everything is mission, nothing is mission. I don't find that quote particularly helpful. I think if everything is mission, everything is mission. And so in every realm of life, we want to redirect it toward Christ, bring all things under submission to the Lordship of Christ. And then that leads into the third category. You've got God's mission and the church's mission, and then one vital aspect of the church's mission is taking the gospel to all nations, and that's international missions.
Well, I'm going to go back to that second category for a second. You were talking about the expanse of the church's mission. Some people are going to push back on you and say, isn't this leading us back down a dangerous road that we've been before, like the social gospel? Yeah. Or losing the fact of the primacy of the proclamation of the gospel, because it's only through the proclamation of the gospel that people are saved. And this is the pinnacle of the work of Christ. So He came to seek and save the lost. Respond to that objection.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing I would do is to reaffirm then the distinction between the church as an institute and the church as an organism. And when the church gathers, it's not got a social agenda in that sense of social ministries and mercy ministries. It's proclaiming the Word, fellowshipping, baptizing, practicing the Lord's Supper. When the church scatters, it's still proclaiming the Word of God, and verbal proclamation is absolutely central, but it's not the only thing we do. Word and deed come together, and our lives should be seamless tapestries of word and deed. If I can take a metaphor for just a moment and of a wheel and say that the church's mission can be compared to a wheel, and that verbal proclamation of the gospel can be viewed as the hub of the wheel, while all of the other things that we do, our deeds, can be compared to the spokes and the outer rim of the wheel. You've got to have both in order for the vehicle to move forward. If you don't have verbal proclamation of the gospel, if you don't have the hub of the wheel collapses. You don't have a Christian mission. And that's how we work against the social gospel. The social gospelers ended up not verbally proclaiming the gospel. Their deeds overwhelmed their words, and you basically removed the hub from the wheel, and the wheel collapsed. However, on the other hand, if you don't have deeds, if you're not redirecting all things toward Christ, number one, you're being disobedient to Christ. You're saying that He's Lord only over invisible things like people's hearts, but He's not Lord over the world. And then number two, the verbal proclamation doesn't get nearly as much traction. You don't ever want your words and your deeds to be opposed to each other.